Thank you for watching my revision of my textbook I wrote to teach homeschoolers world history. A Bible believer looks at world history. Now, I'm going to pick it up where I left off, and I'm going to begin talking about first century Rome, China, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. Now, the classic work on Roman agriculture is the De Re Rustica. Remember the word rustic for something quaintly rural, of 65 AD, written by Junius Columella. He was a retired farmer who came from Spain. He tells us that the best lands were taken up by the villas of the rich, the next by olive orchards and vineyards, and finally the worst was left to the farmer. The lowest slaves resorted to such farming, he laments, while the freemen were fleeing to better opportunities in the cities. He loved the soil and felt it was a crime for men to abandon honest farming for what they would find in a city. In his writing, he tried to persuade people to return to the soil like good Romans should in his estimation. It was during this period also that Pliny, the naturalist, wrote that the large farms had ruined Italy. Similar statements are made by such writers as Juvenal, Seneca, Lucian, Petronius, and Martial. Seneca complains about cattle ranches bigger than some kingdoms, like America would have had out west in the 19th century. Columella said that the masters of these ranchers could not even ride around them to see how big they were. Pliny refers to one estate consisting of over 4,000 slaves and nearly 300,000 animals. Land distributions by Gracchi, Caesar, and Augustus had increased the number of small farms, but most of these have been abandoned during the many wars and bought up by the rich. At the beginning of the first century, it was realized that there were more profits to be made by cattle, oil, and wine than by growing grain and vegetables. But by the end of the century, that was being tested due to the rising cost of slaves. Thus began a long transition from slavery to serfdom, where an eventual peacetime lack of captives for slaves led to the rich landowner breaking up their estates into smaller plots to rent to poor farmers who would have been called sharecroppers in the rural South of America 100 years ago. The tools of farming had not changed in 2,000 years. The plow, pulled by oxen, the spade, the hoe, the pick, pitchfork, scythe, and rake were all still used just as they had been. Grain was ground in mills, turned by water or animals. Horses were bred mostly for war or sport, and did not usually pull the plow as the oxen had for 2 millennia. Olive orchards were numerous, but vineyards were everywhere. Italy had 50 types of wine, and Rome alone consumed 25 million gallons a year, 2 quarts per week for every man, woman, and child. Needless to say, many types of wine were not fermented and would be considered grape juice today. There was no sugar as we know it, but bees were raised to provide honey for sweetening. The ancient country home was a small factory also. Men and women produced leather and wooden farm and household implements, clay vessels, and tiles. A family was mostly successful when it provided all of its own needs and could sell its excess to the outside. Sometimes an artisan would set up a shop in a village and serve many families, but this did not change the independence of the individual family unit. The miller would grind grain for many people, bake the bread, and deliver it, and over 40 bakeries were found in the ruins of Pompeii, the famous victim of Mount Vesuvius's eruption. Everyone wore homespun clothing. Only the wealthy were able to have it clean, bleached, and cut in a fullery. Some delicate woolen fabrics were made in factories. Mining was done mostly by slaves and criminals in the gold and silver mines of Gaul and Spain, the lead and tin mines of Spain and Britain, the copper mines of Cyprus and Portugal, the sulfur of Sicily, the salt beds of Italy, iron of Elba, and marble in Luna, with most of these enterprises owned by the state. The gold of Spain yielded the Emperor Vespasian, whose son and heir Titus was the ravager of Jerusalem, approximately $80 million per year in revenue in today's money. Tacitus tells us that it was the mineral wealth of Britain that was the prize of its conquest. The art of turning iron into steel had now moved from Egypt to the entire empire. The building trades were organized into tree bearers and hauling lumber, and I'm going to talk about the building trades and factories and transportation and things like that next time. So if you watch this video, click like, and if you have something to say, you want to disagree with something I said, please provide your citations. Let me know what you think about the information. Thank you.